In this next section we will add the basic polygonal shapes that we will sculpt into our fish character. To do that we need to look at primitives. Primitives are the built-in building blocks that most modeling starts from. To get started, select the cylinder icon from the primitives flyout. The fish body has a cylindrical shape, so a cylinder primitive will work well for blocking out the basic shape of the body. Click drag in the center of the fish body until the cylinder diameter roughly matches that of the fish. Release the mouse button to finish creating the cylinder and right-click in the empty space to exit the tool. Notice that the base of the cylinder snapped to the plane. This is because the base plane is set to Dynapic in the primitive's creation parameters. To find where we can change or view these settings, right-click on any of the primitive icons. This will bring up the primitives panel in the stack view. Right now it is showing the cylinder aspect because we right-clicked on the cylinder icon. Click on the aspect menu and choose default. These options are shared by all the primitives, and you can see here that the base plane is indeed set to Dynapic. This means that our primitive objects will be aligned with the surface that we started our click drag on when creating the primitive. Factory mode determines whether the primitives should be individual objects, grouped, or all part of the same mesh. Drag snap is also worth mentioning. With primitive creation, inference snapping is always on, so if you find it's getting in the way, then setting the drag snap value to an arbitrarily large number like say 32,000 will effectively turn off drag snapping during primitive creation. The Keep Sizes checkbox makes it so that after creating a primitive by dragging out its size with the mouse, using a single click will create additional primitives of the same dimensions. It's important to note that this overrides the basic size parameter set in the panels for each specific primitive. So for this course, let's uncheck this box. Before we continue further, make sure your cylinder has a height of 1.0. If it doesn't, delete it by pressing the delete key. Then make sure the cylinder height in the primitives panel is set to 1.0. And then go ahead and create the cylinder again like we did previously. With Keep Sizes unchecked this time, it will default to the height set in the primitives panel. Let's rotate the cylinder to line up with our drawing. Change the Z rotation to 0, the Y rotation to 90, and the X rotation also to 0. Now that our cylinder is oriented correctly, it would help if we could see the geometry. So let's change the edge opacity setting. To do that, click on the Settings tab and select the 3D view window to bring up the scene settings. Double-click on the Edge Color selector, change the color to black, and then click OK. Adjust the edge opacity slider so the edges are visible. Now with that done, click the Panels tab to bring the panel stack back up. We're done with the primitives panel for now, so go ahead and close that. Since we're just blocking things out, we don't need so much detail on the cylinder. Change the radial segments for the cylinder to 8. This will make it an 8-sided cylinder. We do need some vertical divisions to work with though, so change the height to 8 also. The result of changing the height setting might not seem intuitive at first, but remember that we rotated the cylinder on its side. Next we need to scale the cylinder to better match the drawing. Let's turn off grid snapping so it won't get in the way. Now using the object widget, click and drag the box at the end of the green x-axis and scale the cylinder out like so. Don't worry if you make a mistake, you can undo it by pressing Ctrl-Z or by clicking on the undo icon. Now click drag in the triangle between the red Z axis and the green X axis to move the cylinder up and to the left a bit. Don't worry about being exact, we just want to get an approximate positioning right now. Before we go on to point editing, I'd like to take a minute and go over the object widget. This widget is how you move, scale, and rotate your object. The green, blue, and red cylinders are color-coded to match the 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. Click dragging on any of these will move the object in that axis. The color-coded arcs will rotate the object around the axis of the same color. The gray boxes on the end of the cylinders are for scaling, and they scale in that axis. Right-click drag on the box will uniform scale though. Drag-clicking the gray triangles between the axis cylinders will move the object in those 2 axes. Right-click drag on the gray triangle will move the object in the axis perpendicular to the plane of the triangle. Now I want to add some more geometry. but I want it to be part of the same mesh as the cylinder. We could do this by changing the factory mode for primitives, but there is another way. Right-click with the cylinder selected to enter Point Edit mode. This will pop up a warning dialog box because point editing a primitive will disconnect it from its creation parameters, and we will no longer be able to go back and edit them. Click Yes. You can see that the mesh is now translucent. This translucency is controlled by the opacity setting in the Mesh Editor settings panel that comes up when you first enter Point Edit mode, before selecting a Point Edit tool. To better tell the difference between what is being moused over and what elements are currently selected, I recommend changing the highlight, selected, and deselected colors. Double-click on the color selectors to open the Color Picker dialog. I like to use orange for highlight, bright green for selected, and black for deselected. Now select the cube primitive from the primitives flyout. Then right-click on the cube primitive to bring up its creation parameters. We're in Point Edit mode, so we will not be able to edit the creation parameters after the cube is created, since it will be immediately added to the existing mesh. Change the cube segment settings to 2 for width, height, and depth. Once that is done, click drag out a cube for the fish head, and another one for the tail fin. Right-click once in an empty space to exit the primitive creation tool. Now if you right-click again to exit Point Edit mode, you will notice that the primitives are all indeed one object and in fact one mesh. Also note that clicking on the Object Select icon will also exit Point Edit mode as well as cancel or exit any currently active tool. Let's end this section here. In the next part, we'll rename our mesh and go over the basics of the link editor.